Welcome everybody to TJ Reddy, A Life of Art and Activism. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dawn Schmitz, the Associate Dean for Special Collections and University Archives at Atkins Library. On behalf of the library, I want to extend my sincere welcome to all who are here today, and a very, very special welcome to the family members and friends of TJ Reddy who we know are here today. We're so pleased to have you with us. Before we begin, I do have a program note. Professor Lisa Homan, one of our panelists, will not be with us today as she has to deal with a family crisis. Of course, we'll miss her contribution to the panel discussion, but we wish her and her family the best, all the best. And our thoughts are with them. I know we're all excited for our panel discussion, so I'll be brief in my remarks. First off, although we are not physically together today, and even have attendees here from at least as far away as Florida, we would like to begin with a land acknowledgement for Mecklenburg County. Let us all respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Catawba and other Native people, and that the city of Charlotte has a Native community that now includes members of all of North Carolina's 8 state and federally recognized tribes. Let us also acknowledge today the many enslaved and indentured people and their descendants, whose labor contributed so vitally to the construction of what is now Mecklenburg County. This recognition leads us to the person we're here to remember today, a man who made such a profound difference in our community through his art and social justice work. We in Atkins Library are privileged to hold archival collections that document T.J. Reddy's contributions to our campus and our community. These include records in the university archives, the T.J. Reddy papers, and an oral history interview conducted in 2004. We also hold a number of his artworks in the University Art Collection, most of which were donated by Professor Emerita Ann Carver, who I believe is with us here today. Because we are the stewards of these collections, we felt it was our responsibility and our honor to hold an event honoring T.J. Reddy. And what better occasion to do so than in the year that saw the 75th anniversary of his birth. On a personal note, I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Reddy when he came to visit us in Special Collections in 2017. I'll never forget that day. His warmth and positive energy filled the Special Collections reading room. He told us how pleased he was that his papers were held at Atkins, and I thanked him for trusting us to care for them and make them available to students, scholars, and the Charlotte community. Indeed, the T.J. Reddy papers are among the most consulted of all our manuscript collections, frequently used in class projects and by scholars. We welcome all who would like to study T.J. Reddy or other Charlotte racial justice heroes to visit Special Collections in person or online. We also have collections of others who were jailed or imprisoned for their political beliefs. Due to the pandemic, our reading room is currently open by appointment, so we encourage you to contact us in advance of your visit. We will put a link to our website in the chat. And before we begin, I want to thank the panelists, along with those at Atkins who helped us get the word out about the event: Sharon Reichard, Jordan Murphy, Ryan Miller, and Stacy Rue. And I would like to thank Adriana Bennett, who coordinated this event. And I would also like to thank the folks at Isle who are running the tech at this event, Marcus and Natasha. And now to introduce our panelists, please welcome Adriana Bennett, our Community Engagement Archivist for Special Collections and University Archives.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adriana Bennett, as Dawn said. Thank you, Dawn, for providing us with the opening remarks for this event. And without further ado, I'll be introducing our esteemed panelists in the order that they will be presenting. First, we have Dr. Mark West with his presentation, T.J. Reddy as a community-based artist. Dr. Mark West holds the titles of Bonnie E. Cohn Professor in Civic Engagement and Professor of English at UNC Charlotte, where he teaches courses on children and young adult literature. He has written and edited 16 books, the most recent of which is Shapers of American Childhood, which he co-edited with Kathy Murlock Jackson. Next, we have Dr. Akin Agundaran with his presentation, The Philosophy of T.J. Reddy. Dr. Agundaran holds the titles of Chancellor's Professor and Professor of Africana Studies, Anthropology, and History at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and served as the institution's chair of Africana Studies Department between 2008 and 2018. We will hold all questions until after the panelists are finished with their talks. There will be about 15 to 30 minutes for questions throughout the presentations, Please put your questions in the chat and I will direct them to the panelists at the end. During this time, we also welcome any personal reflections attendees may have about TJ Reddy. Also, due to the size of this event, we ask that everyone outside of the panelists keep their video off until we reach the Q&A portion of our program. We'll also like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded. Thank you all for joining us, and we will get started shortly with Dr. Mark West.
Should I get going, Adriana?
Yep, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank everybody involved in organizing this wonderful commemoration of TJ Reddy, his career, his art, his many, many contributions to the Charlotte community. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about first how I got to know TJ Reddy, and then talk a bit about his art and his contributions to the Charlotte community through his art, through his poetry, through his activism. I first got to know TJ Reddy quite by accident, really. I just purchased my house where I still live, which is in Dilworth. And when I bought the house, my parents were still alive at the time. And my mom gave me, because she's from a Swedish background, she gave me some really 19th century prints that she inherited from her family that I could use to decorate this new house that I just bought. Well, it was an old house, but I thought, oh, thank you, Mom. And I thought I should get them framed. So there was a frame shop in the Dilworth community at the time. And so I just went there. And that frame shop was actually run by TJ Reddy. I had no idea at the time who TJ Reddy was. I had no idea about his history. I just saw the sign that said frame shop. I said, okay, I'll go there. And so I brought my 19th century print into the frame shop. And there I met TJ Reddy. And it wasn't busy that day. So we just started talking. And he was interested in the history of the print. And so we talked about that, and then that led to talking about honoring one's heritage and family history. And he started talking about his African heritage and art related to that, because he had a lot of, there was like a small museum in his art shop with African-based art. And so we talked about that. We talked for a good 45 minutes. It was just an unexpected pleasure in my day. And that's how I first got to know him. Well, I came back to the English department where I was just a beginning assistant professor at the time. This would have been in the mid-1980s. And I mentioned to my colleagues, I just met this really neat guy. His name is TJ Reddy. And one of the people I mentioned that to is with us today. Her name is Ann Carver, and she was our English professor at the time. And when I mentioned TJ Reddy's name to her, she said, oh, well, let me tell you about TJ Reddy. And she knew TJ Reddy for years and years and had worked with him when he was a student at UNC Charlotte. And so she told me all sorts of interesting information about TJ Reddy, which she wrote down. I ran a blog called Storage Charlotte, and I wrote a blog post about TJ Reddy over the summer, and Ann Carver contributed to the post that I wrote. And if you want to read what she had to say, you can easily find that under the Storage Charlotte blog post. And so as Ann Carver explained to me, TJ Reddy was a student at UNC Charlotte in the 60s and into the 70s. He was born in Georgia, but he moved to Charlotte initially to go to Johnson C. Smith, but then he transferred out of Johnson C. Smith to UNC Charlotte. Back in the days when UNC Charlotte was a much smaller school than it is today, much smaller university. And he got very much involved in creative writing, which is how he became a familiar face in English department circles. But he was also interested in history and took history courses, and he was interested in education. He was really a Renaissance man in many ways. There were so many things that intrigued him. But he was also, this is during the time period of the Vietnam War, he was very much of an activist, and his activism included the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement as it was tied to the Vietnam War at the time, and also activism as it pertained to the university. One of the things that he felt was important, remember this is a long time ago, was that we would have some kind of academic unit that would promote courses and programming related to Black studies. And so he played a role in getting what became the department that is now known as the Department of Africana Studies. He played an instrumental role in getting that department going, which shows he was a student at the time. He wasn't an administrator or a professor, but his persistence, his good arguments, his willingness to speak up at all occasions resulted in things happening. Now, one of the things that he was concerned about back in those days was the segregation of public facilities. There were certain public facilities that were overtly racist. And one of the places that he knew about was a stable where you could ride horses that would not allow African Americans to ride horses or participate. So he kind of pushed the envelope on that a little bit and brought some of his friends, and they went to the stable and created a bit of a moment, if you will. And then not long thereafter, the stable caught fire, and they blamed T.J. Reddy and others associated with him without any evidence at all. It became a what very famous columnist from the New York Times, Tom Wicker, called a miscarriage of justice. He was arrested for burning down the stable without any evidence really at all. What little evidence they had was later proven to be planted. So this became a kind of a cause célèbre, and people were advocating for his release. And Governor Jim Hunt, who was the governor of North Carolina at the time, commuted his sentence. You might think that having endured this very stressful experience of being in prison for a crime he did not commit would have made him into an angry, bitter man, but for some reason or another, it did not. He continued to actually take courses while he was in prison. In fact, he earned a master's degree here at UNC Charlotte in education right during that time period. But it was also during that time period that his interest in creative writing really took off, and he ended up publishing 2 books of poetry that grew out of his experiences, including writing about his own childhood and experience of being an African-American child and what that meant in terms of his childhood during the 1950s and 60s. They were very personal poems, and you would think, okay, well then that's what he was going to do. He was going to become a poet and focus his energy on that. But no, he had so many interests. He was also interested in painting, and he cultivated his interest in painting, took coursework in it at Winthrop and elsewhere, apprenticed with a person who was involved in the framing of art, which he saw as a very important part of the craft related to the presentation of art. When I first met him, he was talking about how important he thought it was to get the framing materials just right. We were looking at the possible frames that would frame the art piece that I had, and he was very concerned about making it perfectly match the picture that it was framing. So his interest in art just blossomed. And for from the really from the, I would say, mid-1980s until the end of his life, most of his energy went into art. But he wasn't interested in art for art's sake exactly. He took his art very seriously, but he believed that art should be something that it was tied to larger concerns, the concerns of community, the concerns of education. He was very interested in public art. Yes, there are lots of people who have examples of his art in private collections, but there are also examples of his art in public art contexts. I want to mention a couple of them. Don, if you could show the picture of the great big painting. He called it a mural. It really isn't technically a mural, but it's in the Charlotte Convention Center. And it's giant. But a mural is generally painted on the surface of a wall. And this is a painting that's as big as a mural, but it's actually not painted on the surface of the wall. And it's called Remembrances of Charlotte's Second Ward. Charlotte's Second Ward, which includes Brooklyn and a neighborhood called Blue Haven, were destroyed. Those neighborhoods were destroyed in an urban renewal effort that really was devastating to these African-American neighborhoods. But what T.J. Reddy did in this large, expansive painting was present visually the community that was destroyed. And if you look really closely, and if you go to the Charlotte Convention Center, if it's open, you can see this piece for yourself. It reminds me of a photograph album, because you have all these little pictures within pictures within pictures, but they all celebrate the community, the things that are going on in the community, whether it's businesses or homes or churches. I should point out that T.J. Reddy was a very spiritual man, and religion meant a lot to him. And there's a spiritual dimension to a whole lot of his art. He was very interested in the African-American religious experience and tied that both to African belief systems, but also tied to Christianity. That would be one example of his public art that you can see if you go to the Charlotte Convention Center. Another wonderful example, a really innovative piece, as a work that's at the Levine Museum of the New South. And what it is a church pew that he painted from an actual church. And then that pew is now repurposed as a work of art and is still on exhibit at the Levine Museum of the New South. And it too kind of celebrates that sense of community that is so important to his work. And another thing that was very, very important to T.J. Reddy, and I remember talking to him about this, was when he found out that I was a children's literature professor, and I happened to mention it to him, he started talking to me about how important he thought teachers were and how important education was and how important it was to work with young children. And he celebrated that in his work as well. There's a piece in the Atkins Library. When you go up the stairs, it's displayed there. And it's a picture of a mother and a child reading a book together. And it's just a really touching a work of art, but it celebrates the sharing of stories. It celebrates the connection between a child and a parent. And it's just one of many pieces that he did that celebrate parents working with their children, it celebrates teachers. He was a great friend of Barbara Edwards, who was the associate dean for the College of Education for many years. And there's actually a painting. I think if you scroll down a little further, Don, you'll see it. That piece right there that was presented to Barbara when she retired from the College of Education. It's on display right outside the dean's office in the College of Education. These works of art show how important education is to his way of his worldview. You see that also, and Akeen, I'm about to hand over to you, but I'll make a little transition here. His interest in education carried over to what's now the Department of Africana Studies. He worked with Akeen in the Department of Africana Studies when Akeen was the chair there. There are examples of his artwork in that department on display when we're able to open up and people can come and go into the buildings again. Boy, I sure miss those days. You can see examples of his work there. So I think all these things show that for him, art was a way for him to communicate his ideas and his commitment to community activism, to racial justice, and to education. I'll leave it there, but I'm anxious to hear what Akeen has to say about his experiences with T.J. Reddy.
Thank you so much, Mark. Let me share my screen. Can you, okay. Well, first and foremost, let me thank Adriana and Don for including me in this program. I'm really honored to speak about a mentor and a friend. Let me start by sharing with you how I met T.J. Reddy. Okay. Well, I arrived at UNC Charlotte in 2008. And one of the things I always tell people is that when you are going to a new place, it's always good to do a little bit of research, to know a little bit about the history of that place. And in April of 2008, when I knew I would be going to UNC Charlotte, I started reading a little bit more about the history of the university, the history of the department. I knew of the founding chair of the department, Dr. Maxwell Reddy, but I didn't know anything about T.J. Reddy. In the course of doing that little research online, I came across this person, one of the students who agitated to create the Africana Studies Department, what used to be called Black Studies Program. So I read about him. He's an artist. Okay, that's fine. When I arrived in July of 2008, I was very fortunate because the department was planning to celebrate its 40th anniversary that fall. The goal was to have a celebration in September or October of that year that will bring back Dr. Maxwell Reddy, you can see her right here, and to invite some of the former students to campus. While they were briefing me about, and I think some of my colleagues are here as well, so I'm happy that you are here, and my boss, my former boss, Dr. Dean Gutierrez, is also here. So while they were talking about it, I said, why making this just one day affair? Why can't we just make it a whole year celebration? We are going to do the 40th anniversary. Why not just make it a whole year? So at that point, I was looking forward to meeting Dr. Maxwell Reddy, but I didn't know that I would see T.J. Reddy. It was at the reception that I see this tall, black, confident old man. I went to him to say hello, and he looked at me like, who are you? Kind of, the way TJ would look at you in a very cocky way, funny way. And then he introduced himself that I'm TJ Reddy. And I froze. I said, what? You are TJ Reddy? So we struck it off immediately. We started talking. And that day, I asked him, I said, I would like you to come to UNC Charlotte next spring, because by that time I was planning to initiate Africana artists in residence program that will bring in an artist every year, but an artist that actually cut across boundaries, an artist that is not just a poet, but also a visual artist, or a visual artist and a musician, someone that cut across the traditional boundaries of creativity. Well, he then asked me, can you afford me? I said, well, maybe not now, but let me talk to my dean, let me talk to other people, and maybe we can afford you. Well, we met in September. By November, I visited TJ in his house. We sat down for 3 hours just talking about life, about everything. By that time, well, I was planning to bring him to campus for a whole semester. And the plan is that I will raise $25,000 to bring him. I was confident in September that I could raise the money, but that was also the beginning of the financial crisis. I went to the dean. My dean gave me some money. I went to Dean Lambler of the College of Arts and Architecture. He promised me $1,500 immediately. So by the time I went to TJ, I only had $5,000. So I was very apologetic. I said, I'm so sorry I couldn't raise what I planned to raise, but I have this $5,000. Please, we need you, if only for one day. He looked at me for about 5 minutes and he didn't say a word. And I was already saying, oh my God, this is a lost case. It's not going to come. Then he started laughing. He said, Aki, if you don't have any money, I will come to talk to students. I want to talk to the students. Wow. So right there, we began to plan. So TJ became the inaugural Africana artist in residence at UNC Charlotte. We planned that he will give lectures. We're going to be 2 major lectures, which he did. We planned that there will be some outreach programs to the community. But by the time, so I could only bring him here for only 2 weeks. So he was here for 2 weeks. But the experience was so good that I asked him to hang around. I said, please hang around. I don't have money to keep you here, but maybe in the spring, you can actually teach a course for us on hip hop and rap. So we put some programs, for some courses together, and we call it Hip Hop and Rap in African American Experience. So that way, he was able to come every week throughout the spring. We'll have lunch, we'll go. So, and then we're also trying to raise money for more community outreach. So we are going to places in the community, trying to talk to people to give us money. And then that means that he came back in the following fall to teach this course on hip hop and rap. While he was here, one of the things that I think was a blessing to my department and to me as well was that I was able to also invite his partners in crime, or quote unquote, people who make trouble, good trouble, right? In 1968, Ben Chavis was here. And I say it's a blessing because the 2 of them, they were able to talk to our students. This is one of our students right here. These are colleagues. It's like a multi-generational conversation happening about how the department started, about teaching our students about the need for them not to take no for an answer when it comes to the issue of social justice. They were also teaching us, the teachers, how to include social activism in our curriculum. So it's very fascinating to have these people from 1968, 1970 on campus in 2009, talking to students, talking to faculty. We went around campus, talking to different kind of people. Benchevis was able to visit the gallery, the side gallery in Raw Art, where TJ's work was then being exhibited. And those conversations really energized many of us in Africana Studies Department, really grounding us in making us understand more why we are here and the purpose we need to serve to the community and to our students. TJ Reddy is an activist, artist, philosopher, and I'm going to use the present tense to talk about TJ Reddy because hopefully by the end of my talk, you will understand why I use present tense for him. I had many conversations with him, and I always regret that I did not write everything down. In fact, at a point, I wanted to record him, but I felt that by recording him, I have to take permission from him, and that might make him not to say more, because he would just come to my office and we'll sit for 2 hours and we will just talk. He would just tell me a lot of stuff. I drew 4 major things from him. He was passionate about awakening the consciousness of the unconscious. He always talks about that. He would say, we need to undo the psychological castration in Black community. I mean, TJ is a masculine man who doesn't, have any apology about it. But he also clearly said that masculinity is not the same thing as patriarchy. Patriarchy is about power. Masculinity is about your social being, as well as your biological being, but mainly your social being. So he is very comfortable in that social being of his masculinity. The second thing is responsibility, which Mark just mentioned. I mean, passionate responsibility to the young generation to teach. He's passionate about teaching. Then there's something that he always talk about: imprisonment of the mind, not the physical one. And I will share a story with you about this quote: "We are all imprisoned." I'm going to share a story with you. The fourth dimension of TJ Reddy is commitment to classical African centered philosophy of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Central and Southern African philosophy about what does it mean to be a person. That is, which says, I am because we are. As the people, the Zulu will say umuntu, ungumuntu, ungabantu. A person is a person through other people. What this says is simply that I cannot exist without my community. I do not come before the community. The community comes first. The ancestors come first. The present people come first, and the forthcoming generation comes first before me. And that is how TJ conquered death. I will explain that hopefully by the end of this talk. So if you want to understand the spirit of a society, I always share this with my students. You don't start with the historian. If you want to understand the spirit of a society and get to the inner soul of a society, first of all, listen to the poets, listen to the singers, the visual artists, and other performers. These are the primal chroniclers because they document the very raw artifacts of time and experience. And if they do their job very well, then they are the conscience of their society. So TJ Reddy is the conscience of Black studies, is the conscience of UNC Charlotte in 1968, is the conscience of the community, because TJ told me that he took it upon himself to record all the activities that led to the creation of Black Studies program. That Benchevis was the leader, and Benchevis gave the other students the confidence to stand up. So, but they will go to meetings and no one will write anything down. So he began to document what they were doing. to, to talk about TJ Reddy, we also need to understand the sources of influence, what influenced him. Certainly, his first 14 years in Savannah, Georgia, where he was born and where he became a young adolescent, was very important in his life, and you can see that in his paintings as well. His years in Brooklyn, New York, going to high school was very important. When he returned to Charlotte to go to school, what he encountered in Black community, the urban poverty he saw, racism that he saw in the New South, this also affected him. His experience at Joseph C. Smith, UNC Charlotte, shows in his poems as well how discontented he was with the kind of education he was being given. He always asked the question, where are the Blacks in this curriculum? Where are the Black thinkers? Is it that they never produced any literature that we should study? So he was asking this question at Joseph C. Smith, and when he arrived at UNC Charlotte, he was asking the same question. Of course, he always talked to me many times about his daughter and the people in his love life as well, which I will not talk much about that here. Then he talked a little bit. We didn't talk directly about his the unjust incarceration of T.J. Reddy and two others, but he will allude to that because I didn't know how to touch that issue. Then overall, I see a man who was a prisoner of conscience. Prisoner of conscience in the sense of that he cannot look away from injustice. He's passionate about what is right and is ready to tell you. Even he was very critical of Black community, and sometimes he could be very critical of me as well. That's the kind of friendship we have. So let me read this poem from his first collection of poems titled Less Than a Score But a Point, Running Upon a Wall. When I was attending a so-called Negro university as a colored track student, going around in circles and getting nowhere, I ended up in a Black slum. I saw rag and saw covered bodies, saw the weary faces of Black people whose eyes told me to run to that college of higher learning and get some help for the Black people in this community. I was as isolated as the slum community when I found the privileged Black students didn't want to do anything outside of the classroom unless they got extra credit for it. I learned at once how college classrooms were likely responsible for the institutional wounds, ignorance, poverty, and disease being educated help inflict. This is one of the poems he wrote about how to awaken the unconscious from their slumber. T.J. Reddy, as Mark also said, is very passionate about young generation. He wrote this poem also in this first collection of poems titled Kwanzaa, a poem to Black youth. You are the life and breath of breath itself, young Black minds, with many memories to learn. Arambi, gather the knowledge about yourself with Ujima. You with the time to take the time and make your life uhuru, freedom. When he came to UNC Charlotte as the first artist in residence, he told me that he will give me a proposal, which he wrote, about 4-page proposal, on how the department will, African Studies Department will collaborate with the College of Arts and Architecture to start a creative and cultural arts learning project in KIPP School, Knowledge is Power program, one of the KIPP School in Charlotte. We went to KIPP School twice to talk to the kids. He enjoyed sitting down and kids surrounding him. It's just amazing to see how comfortable he is among the kids. Unfortunately, we couldn't continue that program. But let me tell you, let me tell you. And then, of course, you see this. This is the painting that Mark was talking about on the first landing of the library. This painting here. But let me tell you something that happened. TJ and I, as I said, we were trying to raise money to keep this Keep School program going. And one day he came to my office in the morning. He said, you know, that at the junction of Tryon and Eastover, see East Drive or Eastover, there is a dealership in that area, car dealership. TJ Reddy apparently went there on his way to school, to campus, and asked to see the manager. And when the manager showed up, he told the manager that about the program we are trying to do at KEEP. TJ was having car trouble at that time. So he asked the manager whether they can donate a vehicle to UNC Charlotte that he would then use to move from school to school so that the program that we are planning will take off. Then the manager told him to go back to UNC Charlotte and bring a letter showing that he's actually working for UNC Charlotte. So when he came to me, he was very excited. He asked me to write a letter. Then I said, TJ, I cannot write that kind of letter. I said, that is above my pay grade. He said, why? I said, listen, things don't work like that. My boss cannot even write that kind of letter because she has bosses. I said, our boss will not even write that kind of letter because she has another boss. And the only boss who can authorize that kind of letter will be the chancellor. So I will need to talk to my boss, and my boss will have to talk to our boss. And TJ gave me this look, which I will never forget. I mean, even maybe on death, I will still remember it. He looked at me and he said, it is not only those in jail and prison who are imprisoned. Most of us outside are also living in prison. Now, later, after this incident, I heard him saying, making this quote, many times in different ways. Of course, I was deflated. I was deflated because I took it personal initially, but thinking about it, I also understood where it's coming from, right? TJ Reddy made this statement all the time. I think what he's talking about is the structures that we all have to work with. But he didn't understand the policy that I have to work with, right? And he felt that just a letter from me could have solved the problem he was having, and that would have taken off the program that we are trying to work together. So when I say TJ is very critical, I can see why he's impatient, because there's no reason for a man like him to be patient any longer. He wants change immediately. And there's these institutional structures that are not making it, that are not making him get to where he wants to be. So he talks about urban poverty a lot, that this is one of the reasons why, that he sees it as part of the prison, that urban poverty itself is a form of prison. Ignorance and miseducation is part of prison. Individualism is part of prison. That racist capitalist industrial system and its manifestations through the criminal injustice system, the prison system, the food system, the drug system, the financial system, the consumerism system that make people think of themselves first before others. These are prisons. And he said, in this system, the blacks that the system cannot control are killed, maimed, or incarcerated. He used himself as an example of that. Damn no thanks, you man. This is one of his poems. Under the circumstances, it may not mean much to you, my humanity, pride, self-respect, my honesty, but give it up for freedom from this can? Damn, no thank you, man. I can't just close my eyes to what is destroying life and me, or forget that a system employing murderers to save life by killing it is nothing but a deadly compromise. I understand that I cannot afford to play this deadly game. Accept the rule that justice is a tool to enslave and abuse me. I cannot afford to think justice will free me without giving up my life for more death, more abuse, more slavery. How then could I be real, knowing I accepted slavery as freedom, injustice as justice, and hypocrisy as equality, knowing I kissed ass? Damn, no thank you, man. In this poem, TJ shows his uncompromising stance towards injustice, that there's nothing that will make him accept compromise injustice. And then TJ talks a lot about Africa. Oh, a lot about Africa. My African ancestry defines who I am, how I think, and what I do. This is a quote from TJ. I am Africa. Africa is me. This is one of the great moments we have when we're talking, just any topic. My Africanness, my Blackness is the source of my art. So there is this unity of Africa, TJ Reddy, creativity, and the struggle. So TJ Reddy has a clear philosophy about his art, about his activism, and that philosophy goes back to Africa. So for TJ Reddy, American slavery is not his point of awakening or beginning of time. The beginning of time for TJ Reddy is Africa, and Africa is also the end of time. And in as much as Africa is, TJ Reddy will always be. So TJ Reddy doesn't see Africa as a banded geography. TJ Reddy believes that Africa is a spirit. He embodies that spirit. And therefore, Savannah, where he was born, is Africa. And every living soul who carry that spirit of Africa anywhere is in Africa. So it talks about growing up in Savannah. It talks about soil, the red soil, the vegetation, the fruits, and the elders. In fact, he told me that the beginning of his painting, of when he thinks about painting, he thinks about how he used, as a kid, he used to collect soils, those red soils, take extracts from trees and fruits and leaves, mix them all with paint, and try to paint. That is how his painting began. TJ talks a lot about elders, and the painting on my left-hand side is donated to the department while he was doing his artist in residence program. And he also donated this one, Bertha and her children. This is Bertha, the first chair of Africana Studies department, which were in me. This one is my office, and then this one is in the main office. And there were moments that things were getting tough in a day. Maybe I had a bad day. Something happened. Looking at these paintings, even when TJ left, always gave me some kind of comfort, because I could ask myself, what would TJ say, or what will he think? And by looking at these paintings, I always discover something. Each time I look at the painting, when you look at TJ Reddy's painting, no matter how long you look at it, you will always discover something new. So this is the kind of relationship that we have. So what is Africa to TJ Reddy? There's another poem entitled Out of Africa's Eden. I am history. My life goes back to Africa. Snatched out of my mother's knife-slit womb into the grasp of a smoldering white fist, I am squeezed, thrown to the ground, stormed into a lifeless pulp, stuck with the stench of death in a slave ship, dragged through a sea of my sisters and my brothers. Sorry, I can't see the next thing here. Blood. Out of it I emerge. Love. I am done. I am a new day. The sun. I am Kosa and Igbo and Zulu. I am Hottentot and Bushman. I am history. I am history. My death, the basis of precious wealth. Having died fetus and centenarian, I live as a poem, preserving my livelihood my ancestry, my heritage, my freedom, my spirituality, black and strong. I am history, preserving my livelihood, my ancestry, my heritage. These are terms that are very, very important to TJ. Without understanding this, one cannot understand TJ. So let me end by reading this quote from a book, one of my collections here, that I think speaks a lot about TJ, the activist, the artist, philosopher in the community. Quote, "It is the artist who is sensitive to the currents of life and who depicts the essential nature of the variety of lives lived and the authority by which they are lived. It is through the imaginative creations of the artist that persons see themselves and their world anew and are empowered to respond creatively to the world in which they live." So TJ Reddy, thanks to him, documents a lot of things about us, for us. And on that note, I will say thank you for listening. TJ lives on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Dr. Marquez. Thank you, Dr. Akeen, for your presentations. They were amazing and awe-inspiring. We didn't have any questions come in the chat yet, but we did have some questions that were emailed to us prior to us having this discussion. And we also are opening up this time for people to, we're also opening up this time for people that might have any personal reflections of TJ Reddy. You can do that as well. So the first question that we have is based on either of you, this is for either of you, based on your experience with TJ Reddy and your knowledge of his work, how do you see the impact of his legacy or art activism philosophy in Charlotte? How many younger generations have students built upon Reddy's legacy at UNC Charlotte in the greater Charlotte area?
You want to answer it?
Okay. Well, the legacy of a person like TJ Reddy cannot be measured within a particular time. I believe that this kind of event will be one of many that we're going to have because we are about to start discovering even more about TJ Reddy in terms of the legacy of his work. The legacy of, and the legacy of that work is the passion, the truth, the sincerity that go into his work. And those factors will always be the source of energy that will make us continue to discover him in so many ways. So for example, when he was here as artist in residence, many students benefited from him directly. He taught a class, as I said, but also many of us who are faculty members, we are the teachers, and basically TJ was teaching us, right? Personally, I benefited a lot from his insight, and his insight shaped a lot of things that we did during my time as chair. So that is the kind of multiplication effect of TJ's legacy. Okay.
What's up, Butch?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Keith. So
that's my boy, man. What up, Butch? That's my brother.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Adriana, do you? Yeah, that's my response. So we cannot quantify TJ's legacy in terms of how many students. We have to see this as his legacy is an ongoing one, and I think not only, TJ Reddy was not just on campus. It was also in the community, reading poetry to children, to little kids, reading stories, right? So it was everywhere. So and when we look at all of that, many of them, let me give you, there were grown-up students. When I say former students, whose parents were taught by TJ Reddy in the community, and who later came to UNC Charlotte, either took classes in Africana Studies or majored in Africana Studies, who talked about their parents that TJ Reddy taught in the community. So then where do we begin to then talk about this impact? So the impacts are multi-generational, because those parents talk to their children about TJ Reddy, and they came to UNC Charlotte, they came across TJ Reddy. They saw it, even when they never met him. We teach him, they saw his paintings, we talk about his inspiration. So the multiplier effect is ongoing.
I should also point out that TJ Reddy, as you said, Akin, was not big into individualism. He liked to always talk about community and elders and how we respond to each other. And he liked to see the connections among different people. So for example, in Charlotte, we have the Romeo Bearden Park, and we celebrate Romeo Bearden a lot in Charlotte, for he has Charlotte connections, although not nearly as deep as TJ Reddy's connections to Charlotte. But one of the things that's important to note is that TJ would look to people like Romeo Bearden as mentors, as examples in his own art. And so one of the things that was important to him was, through his activism, through his education work, through his art, through his poetry, he wanted us to see the connections among people and tie it together in a tapestry, if you will, a collage, a bridging of images. If you look at a lot of his art, it's a lot of little pieces all tied together into one big piece. I think he saw his life that way. And so one of the ways that his legacy, I think, holds true is that it's not just the lone artist working by himself. I don't think TJ saw himself that way. I think he saw himself as part of a larger community that would include people like Romeo Bearden, but also the people who were painting the Black Lives Matter mural on Tryon Street, also the people who were engaged in the activism of the Black Lives Matter today. He saw himself very much as part of a larger canvas, a larger story. I think when we talk about his legacy, we should talk about it in the context of this larger, he was one player in a large movement, and he would always honor the other people that came before him, whether it was Bertha Maxwell, whether it was Bearden, you name it, he was part of it.
Shut up.
Thank you both so much for your commentary on his legacy. It's very obvious that he was like a local leader, but also like worldwide. We have a comment from Krista Camarto. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Who wants to talk about the last exhibit that he did. Krista, you feel comfortable turning your mic on to talk about that?
I turned it on. I met TJ at Diane Davis's house, who was actually also on this. And I have to say that TJ taught the white folk too. I just have to kind of put that out there, because he was really a mentor to me. And when he stepped up at the very end I was director of galleries for the Projective Eye Gallery at UNC Charlotte. And I realized he was on his way maybe out soon, and we just did everything we could to have an exhibit of his work. And when we did, the floodgates just kind of opened, and I had never seen so many people in our gallery honoring him. And it was such a wonderful thing to honor all of his work. And I think what both of the panelists very wonderfully said in their own way was that TJ was a community person first. So I actually feel like his type of activism, what I wanted to say the most was his type of activism worked really well because he always had love in front of it. And I know that's not always heralded in the academic environment, but perhaps it should be, because I think that's what he did really well.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if anyone else wanted to give, any personal reflections, we definitely have time for you to do so. Feel free to open your mic up.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
What's up, Butch and his wife? They family.
Hey, Keith.
I'm Jimmy's younger brother. And my name is Keith. When I was a kid, I remember my brother used to do a lot of painting, a lot of stuff, you know. And my brother was a good dude, man. He was. I just lost two other brothers, Butch, Michael and Dal passed away. And so like in a year times, I lost three brothers out of 8 boys. I lost
Sorry to
three
hear it,
brothers.
man.
I know. Anyway, you know, thanks for all the love that y'all show my brother, you know. Like I said, Jimmy was a good dude. Butch is a good dude. Butch is our brother. I've been knowing Butch for a long, long, long time. Tears in my eyes. Butch is my brother. Butch is my brother and his wife and Vicky. These are my family. That's all I gotta say. Love y'all, man. Peace.
Be well. Love you too, man. I'd like to say something. When I was interviewed by somebody after TJ died, and to just reflect on him. He and I were friends for over 50 years. And one of the things that I remembered when he was in prison, and they would not let him paint. They wouldn't give him paint. They wouldn't give him brushes. They wouldn't even let us bring them to him. And what he decided to do, he felt like they were trying to crush his creative spirit. And one of the things he decided to do was use any resource available to create art. He used crayon, he used dirt, he used cigarette ash, he used anything he could find or gather. He used cloth, dye from cloth. And some of his works that are out there right now have all of that effort in it, all of that passion to keep creating, to keep his energy from being squashed. And it did two things, I think, for TJ. One, it kept his creative spirit alive, and two, and Mark West and Krista talked about it, is it allowed him to keep his commitment to caring about people alive, that the system would not devour him. It would not break him. It would not deny him his humanity and his manhood. And I think those elements in terms of creating art gave him power that they could not take away from him. And I think it underlies a lot of what everybody else has said about who he was as an artist and who he was as a human being. And he lived that out the rest of his life.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do anyone else have any reflections they want to?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I am Juan. Jimmy was my oldest brother also. Whew. Just want to say thank everyone for this. I mean, this was unbelievable. He was a good person, good brother, and definitely my mentor. It's just so, I'm honored to hear all of these good things about him. And all I want to say is thank you to everyone. Thank you. Much love.
My name is Dorset Edmonds, and I used to live in North Carolina for 10 years in the 70s. I now live in Tucson, Arizona, and I want to thank Wendy Fishman and Jackie Fishman for letting me know this. I knew TJ because I was good friends with him, with Butch and Shirley and Vicky, his wife. And I just came across many of the letters that he wrote to me while he was in prison, which for some reason I saved, and I'm glad I saved them because I have just reread all of them. And his activism and his creativity, as Butch was saying, did not actually, despite the suppression of the prison environment, his activism and his creativity flourished. And it came through in poetry, it came through in his commitment to work for justice, to wake up and to help other people wake up. And I just feel very moved and very close to the Charlotte community and and very sad that TJ's no longer with us, but his spirit, as you said, Akin, is alive and it's still with us. And if we knew him as a very strong, impressive person that just doesn't die. So, and I do have one art piece of his that I'm glad to have. And that was 50 years ago. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for your reflection.
Hi, Butch, Shirley, and Jackie.
It's really beautiful that so many people, he touched so many people's lives, and not only was like he was a gift to the world. I think someone else put that in the chat. But I wanted to reiterate what Sharon said, you know, thank you to his family and his friends for sharing him with us. And if anyone else wanted to talk, feel free.
I would.
But yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is Helen. I ran into TJ when I was going in about 70, I think I met him about 73. I was 19 and sat with him in front of the library for a while and talked. And we were both from Georgia. And I was talking about the sweet potato pancakes I'd made that morning or something. And I don't know what his brothers would say, but I think he said, yeah, they're good. I like them too. And we bonded. And I just liked him and loved him like everybody else. And went to the Atkins Library collection, the rare book room, and see that they have a wonderful collection. And I found out a lot of the people I knew then were fighting to get him out of prison. I guess he went after I met him, saw him around UNCC. And there were a lot of folks I knew. And I mean, everybody thought he was worth getting out. And it makes me want to cry that he got accused of that. That was just extremely horrible. And it shouldn't have taken so long to get him out of prison and to pardon him. And he was just a great, wonderful man for everyone who met him. So I am grateful that the Rare Book Room has the collection of papers. And it's been used by students recently too, because it was a little unsorted, but I'd rather it get used and young people know about TJ than for it to sit not being used. So that's wonderful.
Rich Rosen reminded me of the prison years by making a statement about what happened when he was not able to get paints and materials. There's a part of his work many people have not seen. TJ was a great cartoonist, and the cartoon pieces are not always available. In fact, he used to, because he couldn't get paintings and drawings, had a discipline of drawing cartoons about the day by making a line and continue to draw with it not picking up his pen, which became a discipline of providing continuity and at the same time producing humor. Maybe at some point we can look back and find that material. I think all of you would really enjoy the fact that he was not always serious. He had other dimensions, and his humor is a part that we maybe can't remember, didn't have a chance to notice, but that was another feature of how he learned to operate in the world, particularly in prison.
And I want to add, some of the humor showed up too. We knew TJ Frank longer than I and Barbara Edwards, Frank Parker's wife. TJ came to our wedding almost 42 years ago with his probation / parole / guard kind of person from the prison. They got to come to the wedding, and he gave us one of his paintings as a wedding present. And he's given us, or we've bought other paintings over the years, but one of the things that would drive us crazy, and I think it was part of his humor, he would show up at the house with painting tools, intending to change something on a painting that had been on our wall for 20 years. And then pretend to be irritated when we'd say, no, 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 you cannot do that.
It was not living art.
Well, I understand that he would change the names of paintings sometimes just on a whim.
Yes, that's what it used to be called, he would say. It has a different meaning now, so I will rename it. Yes.
Yeah, I worked with TJ when he was staying with us several years ago to create a database of about all his paintings and when it was done and what it was named. And he had photographs that someone else had done. So I would show him a painting. What'd you call this? I don't know, #1 or series #2, or it was just very offhanded about it. And then if we could find it, he often would have written some name on the back. And at that point it was, no, let's call it something else. So yeah, the rolling nature of what he saw in his own paintings and what they meant to him as in nomenclature was very interesting to observe over the years. And Nia, I saw that you're on here. The painting he gave us for our wedding, I named because he painted it with you riding on his shoulders. You were a toddler tot, and we call it Nia's Mist.
That is beautiful. It's nice to know that he had a sense of humor too.
I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. I just wanted to add what Barbara was saying when I donated the paintings to the library, and Dawn was going through them with me and telling me the names that they had. Quite a few of them had different names from what they had when I got them originally. And I think that ongoing re-looking at his work was with different eyes was a part of the way he functioned. And I just wanted to add to what Butch was saying about ways of keeping his humanity and not being cut off from contributing to the world when he was in prison. I would just mention that in addition to finding ways to create art and drawing cartoons, he was very active in helping other prisoners, in counseling other prisoners, helping them write letters for appeals, and also educating them. And so it was always both art and helping others and making a difference. And I think that keeping all of those things together is necessary to get the whole person. And it's so good to see so many people I haven't seen for a long time. This is wonderful. And thank you very much for doing this.
What's up, Rich? I remember you too, man. You look like Butch. You ugly now.
Thank you everyone for your reflections. I know we're at time. If anyone has any other reflections, if not, we can end the program. Thank you all for coming and sharing your stories. Thank you again to our panelists, Dr. Mark West, Dr. Akina Gundaran.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you. We appreciate everyone that shared a reflection to add, to the broader context of who TJ was. And it's amazing that we have his family members here. I appreciate you all for coming out. If there's no other thoughts or reflections, we can close out the program.
Thank you for all
Thanks,
the
everyone.
Thank you.